Hello, thank you for listening in our session today on supporting student mobility, the TCS and Pan-Canadian and International Articulation. My name is Jennifer Cook and I work at BCCAT, and I'm very glad to introduce our guest speakers today. We have Tamara Sweet, Registrar Services Officer in charge of articulation at UNBC, and we have Debbie Lynn, Manager of Transfer Credit at UBC, and her colleague at UBC, Olivia Urbano, Transfer and Credit and Admissions Coordinator. So, for today's session, I'll ask a series of questions on how these individuals and their post-secondary institutions have participated in the TCS Suite Project and how they're using it to manage more than just BC transfer system course-to-course transfer agreements. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat. We'll collect them and we'll leave room at the end of our session to answer them. So now to begin, perhaps each of you could describe your role in dealing with articulation at your institution. We'll start with Debbie, and then we'll move to Olivia and Tamara.
Hi, Jennifer. My name is Debbie Lynn. I'm the manager of the Transfer Credit Unit in the Undergraduate Admissions Office at UBC Enrollment Services. So I work with my Transfer Credit team and also my colleagues in admissions, in Enrollment Services, in the faculties and departments on both campuses to oversee transfer credit related policies and procedures and articulation decisions.
Olivia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia Urbano. I work with Debbie, and we have another colleague, Alana Schramm. And together we take care of all transfer credit requests. What we do is send all articulation requests for formal review to our articulators. And once that is done, we have to ensure that these rules are added to our AS system for our evaluators to use, and then into the TCS for public use within the PC transfer guide.
Everyone, I'm Tamara Sweet, and I am the Registrar Services Officer at UNBC. I am the one-stop shop for articulation at UNBC. So I receive all of the incoming requests for articulation. I work with our admissions, our advisors, and our faculty reviewers. And I also enter all of the agreements both within our internal system and into the BC Transfer Guide.
I'm sure a lot of post-secondary institutions have like transfer team envy right now for UBC's 3-person team, but I do think a lot of institutions are more like UNBC with one person in charge of all things transfer. So thank you all for coming, and so I guess we'll move on to the questions. So how many international and out-of-province students make up your student body, and how many of those students come to your institution with post-secondary courses in hand and on their transcript? So let's start with Tamara.
Okay, so approximately 6.8% of our student body in September was made up of students from outside of BC, so within Canada. And then internationally, 11.6% of our student body was international students. And of those, and of our total population of students, 38% are transferring students. So that's how many students we have coming with transfer credit or block agreements or those kinds of things coming to our institution.
Debbie, how about UBC?
So combined, we have about 45,000 students at UBC Vancouver and 10,000 at UBC Okanagan. And of course, the majority are admits straight from high school, but from the transfer credit, from the transfer portion, I would say about combined total, about 30 to 35% are transfers from within Canada and also US and international.
Yeah. So a third, a little more than a third, that's a lot. That's a lot of transfer from outside of BC.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It is true. Okay, so the next question would be, how would you describe how the process or workflow was like to articulate those agreements, those Pan-Canadian and international agreements at your institution before using the TCS for that work? And so let's start with UBC. Debbie?
Yeah, so before the TCS, basically it was all email based. A lot of information was passed on between the students to our admissions colleagues, to our enrollment services colleagues, or it could maybe come from as well the academic advisors at the department level, faculty level, and also from the professors as well.
Wow. So Olivia, does that mean you're CC'd on all those, you and Alana?
Yes, we would generally be CC'd, or they would come to us as well. So we would just have spreadsheets per country for, say, just to keep track of everything.
And some of those emails and all the back and forth and all that administrative work, some of those may not even reach our office because it's already resolved and confirmed within the department internally.
Okay. I see Tamara nodding. So Tamara, how was it like pre-TCS for Pan-Canadian International at UNBC for you?
Very similar to UBC, they would come through email, or students would bring actual hard copies of their course outlines that they received from their home institutions when they came to Canada, or came to BC from outside of the province. And so if they were hard copies, I would scan those hard copies, attach them to emails, and then send them off to the faculty reviewers in an email. They would then send their articulation back to me in an email, and then I would update our internal system and then let the students know what the transfer credit was.
Okay, so we used email. Email is a very useful tool. It can be. Okay, so the next question would be, can you tell us a bit about how your institution moved from that process to onboarding on the TCS to do this work? Who and what was involved? And so we'll start with Tamara this time.
So I was lucky enough to be at JAM and see a presentation by Debbie and her team about the work that UBC did in terms of the input of Pan-Canadian and international transfer credit into the TCS. And so I came away from JAM, I asked Mike, who many of you know, for more information about what the process was. And then went to my associate registrar and basically told them that I thought UNBC should be a part of this project and that we should be the next institution to onboard for this work. And they both agreed based on some questions and some additional information that we needed. And then, moving to the TCS, once all that information was given and updated and all of those things was very easy.
Yeah. Okay, so UBC did participate in the pilot project, and they actually took it to the next level and now have a transfer tool that's on their own website using the same, I'm going to say API, that the TCS uses from BCCAT. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience and onboarding there, Debbie?
Sure. So that process took quite a few months. We worked very closely together with BCCAT and also with our student communications team in building the user interface to launch the UBC transfer credit search tool. There was a lot of back and forth about designing and tying in the API to make sure that the data from the BCCAT team can appear seamlessly on the user interface on the transfer credit search tool. It is a genuine project collaboration experience, and I think it was a lot of learning for all the parties involved, I would say. Yeah.
Olivia, do you want to chime in or add something extra to that?
I think Debbie covered it really well.
So for the institutions that are listening in, UNBC used the TCS for their internal work tables, but UBC took it that next level and put it public facing for their staff and students on their own website. So a little bit of a different work involved, but at the end of the day, it's using the TCS and incorporating that data. And so it's up to you what you want to do with that. So we're going to move on to the next question. What were some of the challenges, or are some of the challenges you face using the TCS for this work? So let's start with Olivia.
The challenges for using the TCS, I think right now is just trying to, centralize all of our requests. They generally come in all different forms, whether it's directly to our team, to the ESAs, the enrollment services professionals, the advisors, directly to the departments and their faculty. So as Debbie mentioned before, sometimes some of these articulations get lost and we're not able to retrieve them or to track them. So just trying to centralize everyone to get on board with using the TCS, and everything can funnel through our team so everything gets recorded appropriately. I think that's right now our biggest challenge, is just to centralize all requests to come to us.
Yeah, it's definitely a culture change. Managing that is often hard.
Yeah, for sure. It absolutely is. I think some of our articulators, whether they're the veteran articulators, they're used to doing it in the email. They're used to hitting reply and adding the articulation, where sometimes now, like going into the TCS and having to click into the link, build the rule. Sometimes they've emailed and asked if they can just send us an email, and we just have to mention to them that we're trying to streamline the process and get everyone on board, and it actually helps and makes everything more efficient that way. And even just the entering of the rule, because you can actually build the rule, so it helps with streamlining everything. So I think those were our only challenges that we had at this time, is getting the articulators on board and then centralizing all of our articulation requests.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Debbie?
Sure, I'd like to add to that as well. I think the technology part and the usage of the TCS is the easy part. I think as with any technology change, like you mentioned about the culture change, it's about how people will use the TCS for the work it's intended to do. I think the key challenge and the key difference between using the TCS for Pan-Canadian, or what we call outside BC articulations, and also the ones from outside Canada, is that for the BC courses, everything is neat and tidy because the articulations come predominantly from the BC institutions. But for the ones that are outside BC and outside Canada, the person initiating the change is from the student.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of back and forth and emails and administrative time spent on gathering that information first before the course description actually lands into the TCS and ready for the next step.
Tamara, how about UNBC?
Yeah, so similar to what UBC has mentioned, both Olivia and Debbie have identified challenges that we have also faced. One thing, though, that I think UBC has also encountered, and we have as well, is some international courses do not have course numbers or course subjects. And so the TCS really requires that standard, typical information to have it entered into the TCS and send it on. And for some of our international partners and our international schools that we're receiving transfer credit from, they don't have those standard course subjects and course numbers. So those are some of the things that we still need to send those articulations by email to the reviewing faculty and then input that into our internal system rather than having it on the TCS for those people to see. I think one of my challenges is just having to enter it into two different systems. So into the transfer credit system and then into our internal system so that we can let students know what their transfer credit is. And then I find that the reminder system within the TCS could definitely be enhanced, but that's something that I think we can work on for later within newer editions of the TCS.
Definitely, and we've heard that before from Olivia. Actually, we could have a little bit more flexible reminder systems to just prompt the faculty that might have missed the first request.
Yeah, so for sure. Because I think right now with the reminder, you're able to select a specific date. Whereas I feel like if there's a reoccurring reminder, like maybe once a week or twice a week or even once a month, that a reminder can go out to the faculties automatically. So then it'll help the administrative work that we have. I know there are other options that we can definitely do within the TCS to export these requests that are still pending. But if something could be done within the TCS, it really helps with the volume for us, because we did used to do them one by one and the return of them weren't necessarily a large volume. So if it could happen like on a reoccurring timeline, I think it would help a lot.
Yeah, prompts are like using technology for those types of prompts are very useful. It's true.
For sure. So everyone's very email heavy these days. So I mean, within a couple of days, it could be gone from what you see when you sign in. So I think it would help.
Yeah, definitely. So a couple of the changes, just like it sounds like, are outside of the TCS, just culture change and managing people and expectations, and just getting them to learn is something they might not really want to, but there is benefit in using technology there, but also within the TCS as well. There are some, like, our jurisdiction is, we know transfer. This is how transfer works. We've got a system, we've got formats, and outside of BC, we might not necessarily, they might not play the same way. And so we need to have a little bit more flexibility, I think, there.
Absolutely.
Like titles, and it's an issue, right? We understand about transcripts, and some things are different elsewhere.
For sure.
Right? So very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And so how has using the TCS changed the work that's involved with your international and pan-Canadian articulation for yourself, for your faculty, for your registrar's office, and for your students? So any of those groups, if we haven't already answered the question, maybe Tamara, want to take this one?
Sure. I'll start. I really enjoy using the TCS. It's very user-friendly, and it's easy for me to see decisions that come back from faculty and faculty reviewers. I find that those decisions come back sooner, and the turnaround, which means that the turnaround time for students is sooner, and they're not waiting as long for articulations to come back so that they can see what transfer credits they're receiving. It's really been nice for me. I have a core team of faculty reviewers. We're a smaller institution, so I have a very good relationship with those faculty reviewers and with my advising team. And so with the TCS, we can all see the information at the same time, and everybody can see all of the information, and it can be loaded within the TCS. So I'm not getting as many questions about credit values or titles or those kinds of things. So it is making it very much faster for us to get them back, and for the students.
Olivia, how about for UBC?
Yeah, I do agree with everything Tamara has said as well. I feel that one of the changes that have helped is that I feel like we're pretty much getting very minimal emails now when it comes to prospective students that want to ask about how their courses would transfer. Now that we have the UBC transfer credit search tool, we're able to either guide them there, or they're already going there, maybe advised by advisors or ESAs or the faculty, so that they're actually doing a lot of their planning on the TCS and the search tool as well. So I have noticed a big decrease in the prospective student group asking about reviews.
That's great.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And Debbie, from your perspective?
Yes, I think for the articulators themselves, hopefully they feel that they are getting less variety of inquiries, because if we went centralize the TCS articulation requests, for example, so they would be used to just getting requests from the TCS format, or maybe to a limited extent, lesser emails from other faculties or departments or advisors. And then for us, we really enjoy seeing the log feature. Of course, that's also for BC as well, but even for outside BC and outside Canada, having the log feature to know when courses were articulated and by whom. And many times, I think our colleagues on campus will be able to see that courses were already articulated that we can check that they were already officially articulated. So then it kind of cuts down on duplicate inquiries.
Yeah, it's so true, because it's hard to find that information, because usually if it's pre-TCS, it's buried in someone's email, right? And it's harder to find that with the person's gone too, right? So there's stuff like that there are benefits to the logging and activity tracking. So we're at our final roundup question, and it's always one I enjoy hearing the most from people, is any tips or advice that you can give to your colleagues and partner institutions about onboarding to the TCS for your pan-Canadian and international articulation agreements. So let's start with Debbie this time.
Sure. I think the TCS is a very powerful and robust system. So my advice is not to be afraid to adopt it for use for outside BC. You're already using it for the BC institutions, articulations. So it's like a natural progression to carry it to cover the other requests.
100%. I'm not biased. Olivia, and from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. For us, we do offer meet and greets for any new articulators that we may have, or any veterans that need like a refresher, and we have them come in, well, maybe now virtually sign in, and we kind of go through a request for them, show them where to click, what to do, how to submit a request. A lot of them sometimes have problems with entering like the generic request, so we just have to show them how to start entering those. So the meet and greets we've been doing quite often. Also, the other advice that we would probably have is if you do happen to go with the TCS, to take the time to go through all your articulations and all your rules and clean them up, because I know when we had our data pull for us, there's a lot of small things that had to be cleaned up in order to have the clean rules, which is of course what we would want to publish. So those are the two main things, but generally TCS has really helped us a lot. It's helped facilitate a lot of easier work within our faculties, and it's been able to streamline everything. So hopefully, you guys should get on board.
I'd like to add that I'm glad, Olivia, that you brought up about the data cleanup. I'd like to add that part, Mike and the BCCAT team, they are very good at helping. They helped us clean up the data. It's not just a once over. It was a very meticulous, organized way of approaching the data. And so don't be afraid to tackle that part of the process.
Thanks, guys. and finally, Tamara at UNBC, any tips or advice you want to give to your colleagues?
I would definitely echo what both Olivia and Debbie have said. Don't be afraid to move forward and move on to the TCS with both Pan-Canadian and international articulations. As Debbie mentioned, it's just the next step in the resources we're already using within the BC transfer system. Yeah, just don't be afraid of the change. This one's hard for me because I feel like everyone should get into their own rhythm of how they want the workflow to go. But Debbie and Olivia did bring up some great points. And just know that you probably will get pushback, but that at the end, it's totally worth it to just start using the TCS to get those articulations into the system.
Yeah. Oh. Wow, that was great. I really thank all of you for sharing your experience with your system partners. And for those that have been watching, that's a wrap for us. But if you've added to us questions in the chat, we'll take a bit of time now to answer what we can. And again, thank you and for watching, and thank you for our speakers. We really appreciate this time. Hi, everybody. It's Jennifer and our panel when we're back at the live Q&A. So what I'm going to do is read out some of the questions. I did hear from some of the chatting and messaging that there was some confusion. So I'm hoping that these questions are for our session, and I think they can apply. So I'll ask them in any event, and then we'll get an answer from our panelists. So actually, I'll ask the first one, which I think is to me. So could there be a spot on the BC Transfer Guide that links all the provincial transfer guides so that they're in one spot? That's from Anna Brown. And yes, we are going to be redesigning and relooking at the content on the BC Transfer Guide to incorporate some of the international and Pan-Canadian agreements that are going to be showcased this year. So definitely we can add that in there, and we will. So that's one question. So this is directed to Tamara, and then we'll ask Debbie at UBC as well. How long would you say the transition period was from introduction of the TCS to full implementation?
Oh, I was lucky enough to watch a presentation, as I mentioned earlier, by Debbie, and I thought it was at last Jam, but she reminds me that it was a special one-off session that was hosted by BCCAT about moving to the online system, and that was in fall of 2019. And I worked with Mike and Jennifer within the spring of January. Because I don't think it was pre-COVID. I feel like it was like 1 year before that. So I'm going to have to get back to you on that question because I am having a memory block, but we'll make sure that Jennifer or Mike answers that in terms of like the actual time frame.
I don't know if, I hope everybody's seeing this, but I feel like it was like a few months. UNBC, I don't know the exact time and date. I'll get back to you. We'll answer it in the chat, but it was very fast, needless to say. So, but you and UBC, do you want to answer it? Because you did a slightly different thing than what UNBC did with just putting them into the internal tables for the TCS. How about for UBC?
Yes, so likewise, it was a few months. So we probably didn't get started until quite into December after we had that information session. So December and then the holidays, and then so from January to March, I think it was about 2 months. And then, but what we were also working on was the separate user interface on the UBC website for the UBC transfer credit search tool. So in all, it was launched in May. So I would say a few months.
Yeah. This is a similar question, but I think it adds a little bit of extra to it. So how long did it take to implement the Pan-Canadian International Articulation, including the learning curve? So I'm assuming that has a lot to do with like, not just staff learning, but also like the evaluators getting them on board. So UBC, do you want to try tackling that first? Debbie? Maybe?
Sure. So the learning curve for end users to use the TCS or the UBC Transfer Credit Search tool, meaning using including the data from outside BC. I would say the learning curve was very minimal because the users, I assume, would already be familiar with the BC Transfer Guide, and it's very robust. And then, you know, seasoned users to the BC Transfer Guide already know the concept behind looking up courses, right? So to be able to use the UBC search tool or within our TCS to look up the courses from outside BC, it's very, very similar. And I would say it's very minimal learning curve.
Tamara?
I would agree that the learning curve from UNBC was minimal, and in my opinion, lots of our reviewing faculty members were already familiar with international and pan-Canadian agreements and reviewing courses for both of those kinds of institutions. We were just doing it very manually via email prior. So lots of them use the TCS to do our BC institutions, and so moving to the TCS to do our pan-Canadian international, in my mind, was very minimal learning curve.
And it makes sense, right? It's just an extension of other agreements, just not physically residing in BC post-secondary. So, it would make sense that it's a shorter learning curve than a brand new tool that has a bunch of new information. Another question, and it might be our last, is, and I'm not sure if it's actually from this session or if it's from the other session, but we'll ask it because it could be relevant. So wondering how other PSIs are handling the increase in international transfer credit requests, specifically looking at private and tuition-free universities, by Sarah Grivens. So how are other PSIs handling the increase in international transfer credit requests? Tamara?
I see Debbie was ready to answer, so I'm going to let Debbie answer. Totally fine.
Okay, I assume that the question refers to transfer credit requests coming from international students or potential applicants. If that's the case, then they are just coming in via email, or we have a portal for future applicants to submit their questions. And we have a customer relationship database to track all of those questions. And so they are shared by frontline staff, the recruiters, and academic advising offices. So how are we handling the increased volume? I would say that because of COVID, the increase in volume is on all fronts. So we're all just trying our best to manage the volume with as much resources as we can. So I hope that answers the question. If not, please send in another question. Thanks.
Tamara from UNBC, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would say that it's similar in Debbie's situation and UBC situation, as we're just trying to manage everything that we have been thrown at or has been thrown at us as best as we can and the best to our abilities. In terms of getting requests from free or private universities, we have a recognized institution policy within our calendar. And if they don't meet those requirements, then we don't provide transfer credit for those institutions.
I imagine it'd be similar with UBC, Debbie, Olivia?
Yes, so we do follow the same model. So we want to ensure that the institutions are recognized by the Ministry of Education in their home country. Before that's our first hurdle, first threshold to check before we can say whether a course is transferable or not.
I think we're doing pretty good for time, and that's actually all the questions that I see on the mobile app. So I don't know if you have any wrap-up comments that you want to share, maybe Debbie, UBC?
Sure, I'd just like to add that the session is on supporting transfer student mobility. So having this added bonus of this tool, which is a natural kind of progression from the BC environment, is that it may seem like a lot of work to put in the time and effort to make that happen, to have all the outside BC Pan-Canadian international courses be in the database. But ultimately, I think that all the time and effort was worth it, because it really does reduce the type of inquiries or the number of inquiries, and elevate the type of elevate and enrich the advising conversation between the advisors or the frontline staff with the potential applicant or the international student. It doesn't matter whether or not the data is right now searchable or within searchable by a staff, or in the future maybe searchable publicly. But I think overall it does it is really worth the time and effort.
Yeah, I think, and to your point, Debbie, yeah, searchable publicly with the BC Transfer Guide. That's the next phase of this project, the TCS Suite. We're getting our PSI partners or transfer partners, their data, the international and Pan-Canadian, into the TCS, so you'll have it as a workflow. But the BC Transfer Guide, even if you don't have UBC's really pretty search pub tool on their own website, like we're having it on, we're going to be having it on the BC Transfer Guide this next fiscal year. So that's the goal, so that regardless of where you are at with your institution and how you're directing your students to this information, it will be on the BC Transfer Guide. So that's useful as well. I don't know, Tamara, do you have any last thoughts or comments?
I just want to say that the work is definitely worth it. I agree with Debbie and Olivia on that front, and that moving forward, once the BC Transfer Guide has the information on their website, it's going to be so great. We haven't had the opportunity or the means to be able to develop a website like UBC has, and if you haven't looked at their website, you totally should, because it's great. And so we're excited for this next step to move these articulations onto the BC Transfer Guide, because it's gonna be able to help us in our workflow and the things we do with students and the different relationships and conversations we have with students in the future.
Definitely. Students can front load their own research, and they will be able to do research on what they want and hope to get. So that's useful. I think. Wait, is there another question? No, I think that is all the questions. And so I think that's us. So that's it for today. And I just want to thank everybody that attended our session, and also day one of JAM. I feel very good about it. So I'm hoping everybody's enjoying it. And if you haven't had a chance, check out the community section, because there's a lot of activity going on there, and I'm very surprised and pleased. So thank you, everybody. We hope you have a really nice day, and enjoy day 2 of JAM. Bye.